August 1957. In the skies above Missouri, an Air Force plane is in trouble. Out of gas, pilot and crew bail out. What happens next would become the stuff of legend. The unpiloted plane should have crashed. Instead, it makes a perfect landing. This is the story of the DC3, the plane that defined the way we fly. It heralded a new era of air travel.
Well, it's very glamorous. It's mostly celebrities and businessmen.
And became a war hero.
I've seen them come in with holes in the wings and the motor shot out, everything else.
A maverick from its inception.
Here comes the Douglas Company coming in with, we're going to give you something revolutionary here.
Its development laid the cornerstones of aviation as we know it today.
It is truly the linchpin of American and global air transport.
It's the plane that created a revolution and changed the world. June 5th, 1944. The night before D-Day. 13,000 US paratroopers board a fleet of C-47 planes bound for France. It's the biggest airborne operation in history. Among those aboard is 21-year-old Don Jakeway of the 82nd Airborne Division.
We were sitting on the plane as we're going over. I was kind of sitting back and I'm thinking to myself, what am I doing here?
They'll need to fly low over territory bristling with German anti-aircraft guns. But their planes have no weapons, nor even protective armor. Because the C-47 is actually a DC-3, a passenger plane, lightly modified for the military. The odds of surviving their mission are horrendous.
General Ridgway said, you can expect 85% casualty rate. That means 85 out of 100 will not make it.
But the paratroopers have faith that the big ugly plane they call the Goonie Bird will get them to their destination. One of the pilots that night is Julian Bud Rice.
C-47 tended to flap their wings like a bird out there, you know. They had very large wingspan, and so they tended to bounce around a lot. They were very reliable.
The fleet fly in close formation, according to plan, across the English Channel. But on reaching France, they run into trouble.
We hit landfall. Suddenly, there was a land fog. Everyone in the formation disappeared from sight. It was total blackout.
When Bud emerges from the fog, all hell breaks loose.
When I came out, I could see a lot of planes hit my flak and exploding in the air. And others that maybe collided went down. This was 5 minutes of just sheer terror.
The Allies are depending on the C-47s to make it through, deliver the paratroopers, and help liberate France from Hitler's clutches. It's a heavy burden for a military aircraft, let alone for a plane that began life as a regular passenger airliner. Its story begins in 1932 with the arrival of a letter at the offices of airplane manufacturer, the Douglas Aircraft Company. Addressed to company boss Donald Douglas, it comes from Jack Fry, head of TWA, then a new airline with big ambitions. This is no routine business letter. It would prove to be the birth certificate of a plane that would revolutionize air travel. In the 30s, the passenger airline business is still in its infancy, and flying is wildly expensive.
The cost of a ticket to California from New York was about $300. It still is. But in 1930, that could buy you a car.
With the US in the midst of the Great Depression, flying is strictly for the super rich. But a flight aboard an early commercial airplane is far from luxurious.
You see the advertisements and everyone's happy and smiling and eating well. But that was not the reality.
They were noisy, drafty, uncomfortable, relatively slow. You had a lot of engine fumes and gas and waste under the cockpit. People did not feel very well necessarily after flying these.
You were flying 5,000 feet above the surface, so you're in the very turbulent air. On a lovely, calm day, you had a very smooth ride. If not, you were bounced all over the sky.
Worse, taking a flight in the early passenger planes could be downright dangerous. In 1931, disaster strikes. A TWA plane with 8 people on board crashes into a Kansas prairie.
An airplane fell apart literally in the sky, killing all its passengers, one of whom was Knute Rockne, the legendary football coach of Notre Dame.
It wasn't weather, it wasn't pilot error, that the darn thing had rotted out from inside.
The crash is a wake-up call to the airline industry. Before air travel could become profitable, it first had to become safe and affordable.
Fear of flying, if the airplane was going to come apart in some way, or fares that they were so expensive that only the very wealthy could fly. Those are the two things holding back the growth of aviation.
Boeing is the first to respond with a new plane that would electrify the industry. The Boeing 247.
The Boeing 247 is considered the world's first modern airliner.
Boeing's new plane is 50% faster than the widely used Ford trimotor, while using 1/5 less horsepower.
Incredibly efficient.
Its monoplane design, with one set of low-lying cantilevered wings, minimizes drag. It is robustly made of aluminium alloy and is stable in flight, which makes for a more comfortable ride.
All these were very important factors that made the 247 a revolutionary airplane.
United Airlines promptly orders 59 247s, an order that would keep Boeing busy for 2 years. That leaves United with the best plane on the market and its rivals out in the cold.
The Boeing company made it very clear to the airlines that you can have our 247 after United has all theirs.
One airline isn't prepared to wait. The boss of TWA issues his momentous challenge to the aviation industry. Build me a plane to rival the 247.
Among the companies that responded to that was the Douglas Company of California, headed by Donald Douglas.
Donald Douglas was one of the great names in aviation history. He'd been around since the very beginning.
Douglas is a trained engineer and highly respected in the business.
His word was his bond. He made countless deals selling airplanes on a handshake and paperwork to follow. He was that well respected.
Douglas is renowned for building sturdy planes for the military. But TWA bosses don't just want a 247 clone. They want something bigger and better.
The 247 still did not go far enough, and that's where Douglas capitalized, using the 247 as an example of what could be done, but then going beyond it.
Designing a passenger plane to beat the game-changing Boeing 247 is going to be no easy feat. So Donald Douglas puts his best man on the job. His protege, engineer Arthur Raymond.
Raymond is an authentic American genius, a man with drive and ambition. Doug foresees him not only as a top flight engineer, also somebody who will get the job done.
Douglas gives Raymond just 7 days to come up with a design. The spec is ambitious. The new plane would need to be able to fly 25% further, 1,600 kilometers non-stop, and carry 12 passengers, 2 more than the 247. It's a big gamble. If Raymond gets the design right, it would transform the fortunes of the Douglas Aircraft Company. If he fails to deliver, the company faces bankruptcy. August 1932. Douglas Aircraft's mastermind engineer, Arthur Raymond, pitches the design for their new passenger aircraft, the DC-1, to TWA. They are taken aback by what they see.
When TWA saw the initial concepts for this machine, there was a big question mark because it was a twin-engine airplane.
The Boeing 247 had proved that 2 engines could work. But still reeling after the Kansas air crash, TWA had specifically demanded 3 engines, 2 to fly and 1 as a safety precaution.
The aerodynamics was so poor for the aircraft of those days that if a twin-engine design lost power in 1 engine, it would simply descend, and you needed a 3rd engine to give it any chance at all of remaining aloft.
Here comes the Douglas company coming in with, no, we're not going to give you what you thought you wanted. We're going to give you something revolutionary here.
TWA's technical advisor is none other than Charles Lindbergh, who'd flown the first transatlantic flight 5 years earlier. Lindbergh is skeptical that a plane this size could survive losing an engine.
Will this thing fly?
Yes, definitely going to fly.
If you can make it fly, then we'll buy it.
Raymond bet the company on the DC-1. Their costs were not covered in the original contract. They weren't going to make money on this thing until after they had delivered over a certain number of airplanes.
Raymond had used a complex aeronautical formula to design the DC-1. To prove it could fly on 1 engine, he turns to nearby Caltech, which is pioneering a new aviation technology, wind tunnel testing.
One can arguably say that the Douglas DC-1 represented the first scientifically designed American airplane, and playing the key role in doing that was really the tunnel tests that were done at Caltech.
The initial tests are deeply troubling. Despite the bold promises to TWA, the DC-1 is fundamentally unstable and prone to turbulence, even with both engines working normally.
It had to do pretty much with the center of gravity problem and how this wing and the fuselage fit together.
Raymond doesn't give up. The team conducts more than 200 tunnel tests before coming up with a solution. Like other aircraft of the time, the plane's wings are set at right angles to the fuselage. Raymond discovers that sweeping back the wings shifts the center of gravity, dramatically improving the plane's stability.
The wing design proved so successful But really, if we take a look at a lot of subsequent aircraft, we see that they all tend to emulate that moderate swept-back approach.
And to minimize turbulence and drag between the wing and the fuselage, engineers devise an element called a fillet.
That lovely little compound curve you see between where the wing meets the fuselage, it smoothed it out considerably.
These modifications create a plane that should be able to maintain stable flight, even on a single engine. Wind tunnel testing has come a long way since the early days to become a fundamental part of the aviation design process. The Airbus A380 went through 5,000 hours of wind tunnel tests, finessing everything from ice prevention to noise reduction. Back in the 30s, the Douglas team are grappling with the problem of how to slow down a large and powerful plane on landing. Their solution would become an integral feature of modern airplane design.
Back then, you didn't really have runways. You had large fields. You can't ask the city to build a whole new airport for you just for your one airplane. So you try to make the airplane fit. So how do you slow it down, slow enough to have a comfortable landing, yet maintain the ability to go fast? And one of the solutions is flaps.
Wing flaps, as pioneered by Douglas, are now used on all modern airliners. On approach and landing, lowering the flaps helps to bring the plane to a halt more quickly. And while lowered for takeoff, they dramatically increase a plane's lift, meaning it can take off at slower speeds, using shorter runways. The DC-1 never went into production, but acts as a stepping stone to an even better version. In May 1934, Douglas reveals their new plane, the DC-2, a 14-seater. It's even faster and more powerful than its predecessor, and immediately sets the air industry alight.
The DC-2 came on the scene with a bang. TWA flew this brand new airliner across the country in record-setting time. We have an airplane that's faster than anything that even the Army has. It was very dramatic, got headlines.
The DC-2 could carry 4 more passengers than the rival Boeing 247. It offered a faster, smoother ride and needed fewer refueling stops. The plane is a hit, and Douglas production lines go into overdrive.
When the aircraft entered service, it was obviously the airplane to have, and immediately made the 247 obsolescent.
Douglas had scored a major coup against its rival Boeing. But its greatest contribution to commercial aviation is yet to come. May 1935. Orders are pouring in for the Douglas Aircraft Company's new plane, the DC-2.
Donald Douglas was looking at a full order book. As far as the eye can see, they're actually making money, which in those days is almost unheard of in aircraft production.
Then, Donald Douglas gets an unexpected call from the head of American Airlines. C.R. Smith wants the DC-2 for his fleet, but with a twist. He wants it adapted to create a sleeper aircraft with 14 beds in place of seats.
Donald Douglas absolutely convinced this is a terrible idea and don't want any part of it. The sleeper is a dead end, that there's only going to be a very few amount of these. There's not going to be a market for it. It's not going to work the way out the C.R. Smith thinks.
But then Smith hands Douglas an offer he can't refuse. An order for 10 Douglas sleeper transport planes to the value of $795,000, around $14 million in today's money. This is no simple design tweak. Accommodating beds means making the DC-2 a staggering 50% bigger.
Usually when you expand an airplane design, you stretch it, you literally stretch it, and you make it longer. In this case, they actually widened it.
Early planes were built around a fuselage that resembled a flying box. But the inherent weakness of a square set tight limits on a plane's size. By the 30s, fuselages are becoming more rounded, making them stronger. Raymond and his team pushed things further than ever before. What they came up with is the world's biggest circular fuselage. A cylindrical shape is not only supremely aerodynamic, but also very strong, distributing forces evenly around the structure.
The round fuselage shape enhances the strength of the aircraft. There are no real failure points on it, no hard corners or anything like that. It's just a remarkably strong design.
Combined with the single-skin metal fuselage of the DC-1, which helps to support the structure, the new design would allow a big leap in size and weight. Douglas pulls it off again, creating the world's largest and most fuel-efficient modern airliner. Yet sleeper planes never catch on with passengers and are swiftly dropped. But Donald Douglas isn't about to stand by and see his groundbreaking new plane mothballed.
The more that Douglas and Raymond started thinking about it, then they started thinking beyond the sleeper transport. It didn't take long, it was very quick.
Douglas realizes that replacing the beds with seats would increase the number of passengers by 50%. The DC3 is born. A wonder of engineering, it lays the foundations for the modern airliner. It takes 6,000 people and 500,000 rivets to build every one. Above all, since it uses only 3% more fuel than its predecessor, the extra 7 passengers the DC-3 could carry make it the first ever profitable commercial airliner. The Douglas team have achieved an extraordinary breakthrough, an airliner that makes mass air travel possible.
When the DC-3 came along, there was a real recognition that a new standard in air transport had arrived. Air transport was no longer merely the stuff of the adventurous, it was becoming routine.
Flying coast to coast had meant a 25-hour ordeal. Now, the DC-3 cuts that journey time almost in half. But above all, the DC-3 makes passengers feel safe.
It wasn't going to make strange noises. It wasn't going to smell funny with the gasoline fumes coming through. It was going to have heating in it, and so it wasn't going to be cold in wintertime. The whole key for the airline industry was to make this normal and safe, and the DC-3 makes it normal and safe.
It quickly became the airplane of choice of airlines all over the United States and quickly around the world, best they could get a hold of them.
Flying is now glamorous. The journey becomes the destination.
Would you like a cigarette, sir?
No, thank you. We'll have a magazine when you have
I'll
time.
bring one right up.
Thank you.
Passengers recline in new levels of luxury, not an option in smaller planes. The DC-3 helps to popularize a new role in aviation. The air hostess. Vicky Herrell was one of a new breed aboard TWA's DC-3 fleet in the 1940s.
It was very glamorous. I mean, TWA was known as the glamour airline. So it's mostly celebrities and businessmen. You really got to know your passengers. And the men would ask you, what your phone number was and stuff like that. Can I call you when I get to New York? Can we have dinner?
For the new air hostesses, working 3,000 meters up is better than any job back on the ground.
I enjoyed it so much. I mean, it was just exhilarating. I loved my job.
As one of the few jobs considered suitable for women, competition is intense. In 1935, 2,000 women apply for just 43 positions offered by TWA. Entry requirements are tough. Applicants have to be between 1.52 m and 1.62 m and weigh between 45 and 53 kilos.
The weight restriction, well, they're very strict about that. And in fact, after you started flying, we had weight checks every 6 weeks. If you were caught like 3 or 4 times being overweight, then you were fired.
And the training isn't just about looking good.
We had to learn everything about an airplane, theory of flight. We studied meteorology, aerodynamics, because people weren't flying very much in those days. I mean, it was so new.
A key part of the job is reassuring passengers unused to flying.
And some people would be extremely nervous, and of course I would calm them, try and calm them down, and I could do that. I could do it.
And hostesses must come prepared for every eventuality.
They would wear a cape that had large pockets. And in this pocket, they would have to carry a wrench, a hammer, and a railway schedule. Because if, in fact, the weather got too rough, they would have to land the aircraft, and the stewardess would have to make sure that they knew what the train schedule was to take the customer to the train station.
6 years after its launch, the DC3 has sparked an explosive 6-fold growth in US passenger miles. By 1939, 350 DC3s have rolled out of the Douglas factory, making it the unassailable queen of the skies.
It's estimated well over 80% of all the airliners flying in the United States were DC-2s or 3s. It was just that good an airplane.
With the DC-3, commercial aviation came of age. No aircraft in history has earned a greater reputation for dependable service than this universally famous 21-passenger transport.
The DC-3 helps boost an economy still recovering from the Depression. Soon, it will be called upon to perform an even more momentous task, helping to save the world from a terrible new threat. In December 1941, the bombing of Pearl Harbor propels America into a conflict that spans the globe.
The crime of the century, death and destruction as gratitude for years of peace.
Since the unprovoked and dastardly attack by Japan, a state of war has existed.
The Army needs a rugged transport aircraft to shift troops and supplies to the front line. But creating a new plane from scratch would take too long. Luckily, the US government and military have already foreseen the need for just such a plane.
They took a look around at what the airlines were flying. They were flying superb transport planes, particularly the DC-3.
The order comes down. Get the DC-3 ready for war. A keen sailor, Douglas takes the team aboard his boat to brainstorm how to turn their airliner into a military transport plane.
It is kind of ironic when we think about it. A sky train suddenly turns itself into a military workhorse.
And all they really did was put a cargo door on it and beefed up the floor so it could take heavy loads. And that was it. It's such a great airplane, such a strong airplane. You know, they didn't have to modify much at all.
The DC-3 is reborn as the C-47. By 1944, a C-47 is rolling off the production lines every 34 minutes. Many of them destined for the British RAF, who call them Dakotas.
The DC-3 C-47 is an amazingly overbuilt airplane. They didn't know
how much stress various designs could take. So they decided to overbuild it just to take care of it.
Famously, you could drive a 1-ton Jeep through the C-47's cargo door. It could carry 28 soldiers, and often more. In Burma, one RAF Dakota evacuates 65 walking wounded. The C-47s and Dakotas haul troops and supplies to every theater of the war.
The C-47 was critical for the war effort. General Eisenhower claimed it's one of the most important war-winning weapons that the Allies had.
Perhaps the C-47's finest hour comes at the most critical moment of the war. On the eve of D-Day, Julian Bud Rice flies an unarmored C-47 carrying 21 paratroopers across the English Channel and into a barrage of enemy fire.
You could see the anti-flak burst coming from the ground and the tracer bullets coming up. It was almost impossible to avoid everything, so you were lucky just to take some machine gun fire.
Your 6-minute warning, rise and shine.
As his C-47 enters the drop zone 8 kilometers from the French coast, 21-year-old Don Jakeway prepares for the most terrifying moment of his young life.
The jump master stood there in the door.
Go, go, go!
And if you froze in the door, he had orders to shoot you.
1, 2.
When we jumped, the bullets were going up. You could hear the zit, like going through your chute. You know the Germans are there, and the moment you jump in as a paratrooper, you're surrounded and scared to death.
821 C-47s fly in the first wave. Astonishingly, all but 21 of them deliver their human cargo to the drop zone and return home safe, including Bud Rice.
The plane took a lot of hits. I was very fortunate. I came back safe and sound. Had no problem.
Don Jakeway goes on to spend nearly 8 months fighting his way through occupied Europe before being shot by a Nazi sniper. At a hospital in Belgium, he encounters an old friend.
I can see this C-47. It was a hospital ship. It had all the bunks and wounded.
For every man killed during the invasion, at least 3 are wounded. 8,000 on D-Day alone. Now, the same C-47s that delivered paratroopers into battle become flying ambulances, often using roughly improvised airstrips. The plane they called the Goonie Bird evacuates 750,000 wounded men from all over the world.
There was no sustained air transport enterprise that enabled the Axis powers to supply their forces routinely in the way that the Allies did, thanks largely to the C-47.
The C-47 would also leave a lasting legacy on military strategy.
When NATO responds to a crisis, how does it do so? It does so with modern airlift capability. And that modern airlift capability is rooted in the experience of the C-47 and the Dakota back in the Second World War.
Even though the last DC-3 was built in 1946, there are still hundreds of working DC-3s in the air. It is the only pre-war aircraft still flying commercially. Rob Bolling and his DC-3 deliver cargo to Catalina Island off the coast of California.
It's very cool that this thing survived. It's a testament to the airplane that it's survived this long. I know it's a really good designed airplane, so I feel privileged to get to fly something like this. It's a piece of history.
Rob moves 1,300 tons of freight every year, whatever the conditions.
It's very controllable with difficult crosswinds. It's right there for you the whole way down as long as you treat it right.
Despite being 69 years old, his DC3 is still a rugged and economical cargo plane.
That's the good thing about the DC3. It can move stuff for not a lot of money.
Back in 1945, thousands of surplus military aircraft are being sold off for scrap. But the C-47 gets a new lease on life. Its speed, range, and ruggedness make it the plane of choice for a new era of global air travel.
It was the demobilized C-47s and Dakotas, now back in civil service, that enabled the expansion of air transport all around the world. It became an iconic global airlifter.
The reborn DC-3 proves the perfect plane for small regional airlines to spread affordable air travel to every corner of America and Europe.
And an awful lot of airlines, particularly in the United States, but around the world now, could buy, for a very low price, a real first-rate airplane.
By 1946, there are 1,500 DC-3s flying primarily short-haul routes all over the globe.
The DC-3 was entering a second generation. It was no longer the primary airplane of most airlines, but it was ideal for local service routes and get in and out of anywhere.
Thousands of ex-service pilots are arriving home to their small towns across the US, looking for jobs. Many of them will take to the skies again, this time for peaceful purposes.
Now the DC-3s cost next to nothing. You could start an airline for next to nothing, and with some luck, turn it into a viable airline. And quite a few did that. And then introduced flying to thousands more people, because now it was more affordable.
Yet even as the peacetime civil aviation boom gathers pace, the DC-3 is again called to assist in a new conflict threatening the globe. On June 24, 1948, Stalin fires the first salvo of the Cold War. The Soviets mount a blockade of Berlin, cutting off supplies to the sectors of the city under Allied control. The aim? To starve the people into submission and annex the city.
As conquerors, the Russians are treating the Germans with the calculated severity due an enemy people.
In the British sector, one young Berliner lives with her parents and two younger sisters. When the blockade begins, Stephanie Plum is just 16 years old.
They closed the roads, they closed the seaways, they closed everything. Conditions were very bad. We had just gone through a war, and really, Berlin was demolished.
The main power station is in Soviet-controlled East Berlin, leaving locals at the mercy of the Russians.
Whenever they felt like it, they shut the electricity off, the water off. There was not enough food. The children were the first ones to go.
The situation is bleak. But what the Berliners don't know is that the Allies are hatching a rescue plan. And at its heart is the C-47. June 1948, Berlin. The Soviets are blockading all food supply routes into the city's Allied-controlled sectors. 2 million Berliners are on the brink of starvation.
My little sister cried all the time. Cried because she was hungry, and all we gave her was water.
Like many other Berliners, Stephanie Plum is driven to desperate measures.
In the apartment we were living in, there were reams of white tissue paper. I found them, what a find. So we ate the tissue paper with a little water. The Russians thought, you know, Americans would give us up. No, they didn't. They didn't.
The Allies mount an airlift of unprecedented scale to fly in essential supplies and break the blockade. With their 3-ton payload, the C-47 and the Dakota are the obvious choice to lead the charge. On June 26, 1948, the first C-47s land in Berlin.
We heard the planes coming. We thought, what are they going to do? They're bringing food? What's going on?
A plane lands every 30 seconds. The Allies ship in thousands of tons of coal, food, soap, drinking water, milk, and medical supplies. Stephanie Plum disobeys her parents to go and see the Allied planes at Tempelhof Airport.
The Germans came like ants when a plane landed, cleaned it out, took everything out, fuel in, and the plane went off. And this went on 24 hours. Never was there a stop. Constantly. In thunderstorms, in the rains going sideways, in foggy skies, no landing lights. The sky was for a year, never without planes.
But bringing salvation to so many is not without sacrifice. There are 25 plane crashes during the airlift. Pilots must navigate a narrow flight corridor under constant harassment from Soviet planes flying dangerously close. On July 25, 1948, a C-47 smashes into a building as it is landing, killing both American pilots.
They were still carrying the wreckage off, and the Germans put up a little memorial plaque.
In all, 101 airmen and civilians lose their lives ferrying in the supplies. The airlift continues non-stop for nearly a year. By the time the humiliated Soviets lift the blockade in May 1949, the C-47s and their successor C-54s had clocked up 150 million kilometers. It's an astonishing achievement.
These planes came to feed us and to be good to us. We never forgot what was done to us by the Americans. It was so beautiful, and it still is.
The C-47 goes on to see further conflict in Korea and even in Vietnam, where it's the oldest military plane in service. But by the 60s, its visionary creator is ready to hang up his slide rule.
One day, Donald Douglas went to a meeting with an airline about a new model. And he looked around the table, and all of them are accountants and lawyers. There are no engineers, there are no scientists, there are no visionaries, and the fun went out. The world was aging around him and changing, and he didn't care for it.
After the war, numerous aircraft designers try and fail to create a replacement for the DC-3. It's dubbed the Holy Grail of airplane design. But nothing can match the versatility, rugged reliability, and economy of the DC-3.
The engineers and the designers at the time knew that they knew a great deal. They also knew they did not know a great deal. So they made the airplanes then a lot stronger and a bit heavier than we would today. But because of that, the likes of the DC-3s are still flying, almost unbreakable.
The DC-3 story spans more than 2/3 of the entire history of powered flight. It's an airplane that wins the hearts of all those who've flown her.
It was wonderful. It was a wonderful plane to fly, very easy to fly.
And I've seen them come in with holes in the wings and the motor shot out and everything else. That C-47 is one of the best airplanes that's ever built.
The DC-3 makes global air travel routine, accelerating the rise of the industrial economies.
DC3 makes the point to the flying public that it's safe and comfortable to fly. It makes the case for the airlines that they can actually make money.
Many argue that no other single airplane has left such a broad and lasting legacy on air transportation.
If we take a look at air transport, how it evolved right up to the era of the jumbo jet, at the heart of all that is the experience with the Douglas DC3 back in the 1930s and the 1940s. It is truly the linchpin of American and global air transport.
The genius and hard work of engineers at Douglas Aircraft Company created a standard of modern airplane design that fundamentally changed the way large airplanes are built, right up to the present day.
There's a little bit of the DC3 in every airplane that flies today, no matter where that airplane comes from.